Hello, and welcome once again to the New York Jazz Musician's Voice. My name is Jonah Jonathan, and thanks for tuning in. Today I have the great opportunity to present for you an interview I conducted with jazz pianist, composer, educator, and percussionist Michele Rosewoman. We sat down in her lovely apartment on the Lower East Side to discuss her life and the music that she's created. Michele has worked with the who's who in jazz, including Billy Bang, Paquita Carl, Julian Priester, Oliver Lake, Greg Osby, Steve Coleman, Rufus Reid, Billy Hart, and many others, just to name a few of the people that she's worked with. Michele has been awarded numerous grants and awards for producing great music, live original music that comes from the different groups that she's a part of. And in addition, she's been a leader on 8 recordings to date, and she's planning on producing many more. And she produces some great creative original music, and she's really doing something that is unique in the scheme of things in jazz. Michele Rosewoman has traveled and toured extensively throughout the world, and travels, teaches, gives master classes and performances all over the world. This interview is a little bit over an hour long and features some great playing by Michele, original music in the beginning as well as the end of this video. The end, she actually plays original music and then a little bit of body and soul. And I hope you guys continue watching this series. Check out the other videos, and please check out this interview. Just watch it and stay tuned for future interviews.
I remember the feeling, when they brought a piano home, and my folks brought the piano home at age 6 when I was 6, and every day when I came out of my room and saw it, it was exciting. I just had a feeling about it, I came up around the music, in the music, hearing quite a spectrum of wonderful music in my home, and it led to, my deep immersement in jazz and my exposure to a spiritually based, what they call world music today. Then was just, music from around the world that I heard, that I was very intrigued by the spiritual aspects of the music. So I think that led very much so to my own involvement with Cuban folklore, which came more like age 18, and led to my playing congas and studying traditions in a serious way. And when those worlds of interest met, in some ways my path was really born.
Well, that's great. I mean, and you mentioned to me that your parents had a record shop. Were you able to listen to a lot of unique music in that setting?
Yeah, that gave me access, and just the times, and the location.
Yeah, it must have been an amazing place. I mean, that's
Oakland and East Bay, in that time period, between Motown, R&B, funk, and the jazz I heard in my home. I mean, these elements were all very influential for me.
And I know you, one of your major mentors was the pianist and organist Ed Kelly. Could you tell us a little bit about how your relationship started with him, and a little bit about what you learned from him?
Ed Kelly was a blessing in my life that I met at an early age, and Ed really taught me the fact that music is sound. I think that would be the way I would summarize the big impact that he had on me. We were all learning tradition and needing to, immerse ourselves in the elements and the theoretical knowledge to play this music, which we need more than people playing other music. It's a fact because we have all the choices, and we like to obscure our chords, our time, and put a little abstract into our concept, into our approach. So I think that freedom that we have is a responsibility. When you have all those choices, you have to choose responsibly to be effective musically in your life, whatever. A good metaphor and microcosm of life. I think this music is one. But the idea of music being sound meant that when you touch your instrument, you hear it. You hear it. Which means when you touch a messed up instrument, you're hearing that too. But Ed Kelly was himself, but very rooted in and familiar with tradition, and able to convey it without a lot of words. And he was never a formal teacher. He was my mentor. I followed around. I hung. I asked questions. I was given direction and advice and all those things that happen, when one has a kind of long-lasting impact on another.
Well, that's amazing. Nowadays we're not really necessarily able to get such a close relationship with a teacher-mentor relationship, except in the collegiate scene, if you will. But that must have been great to get that. With,
well, yeah, things have changed in that regard. It's definitely different.
Definitely, yeah. So, and then your relationship, you started studying Cuban and Haitian folkloric percussion and music. How did you come about combining that with your experience with jazz? What do you think led you to get the idea to really combine these musics together?
Well, that was kind of spirit led me. I heard it as one. It's coming from the same source, and there's relationship. And although at that time it was very much two parallel worlds, and they really didn't meet. One was learning and respecting and a tradition that you really didn't alter, and you definitely had to learn it. Learn in a very deep way before you did anything with it. I think that's true with jazz as well, but jazz is a music that's meant to expand, and where we expand the vocabulary, the concept, it's very different in that regard. So one was a world of expansion and not challenging tradition, but extending tradition. The other was a world of maintaining a tradition, and one would think that they were very different, But for me, in reality, I started hearing them in my dreams as one.
Well, that's great. I mean, especially it's like the just at the time of the fusion era, if you will. It's a fusion of jazz and your passion, your music, and you wouldn't call it rock jazz fusion per se, but it's definitely a musical fusion that is very unique to your own playing. And
that's true. Now fusion is kind of being done from every angle in every way, and sometimes even kind of forced, But I think that what I heard was a very natural meeting point, and immersing myself in both traditions and continuing my studies and involvement and the living of both was vital to preparing me to do anything really righteous with the manner of bringing those things together, those profound idioms together in a profound way.
Sure. Well, and then you started performing at various venues in the San Francisco area with musicians like Julian Priester, Julius Hemphill, Akita Carroll, and Oliver Lake. Could you tell us a little bit about your time and development with these musicians
Well, I
in that
think
area?
the music life is really, really interesting. I felt that I was just really studying, learning, the traditions, bebop, and trying to learn the tunes and absorb all the artists that were important to our time, are important forever to everybody. But for us, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and for me, Bobby Timmons and Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane, and Herbie and Miles, Wayne Shorter, Horace Silver, and many more. I can't hardly start a list and then make myself stop. That's what I just did. That's why you heard me pulling back.
Yeah.
But but for me, Bobby Timmons and Monk, in particular as piano players, and Bud Powell. But I really absorbed. I'm leading up to answering your question because it's so connected to these things. But I really absorbed a lot of the really traditional great players through my mentor Ed, who would sit down and play and peek up over those glasses. He'd be like, "Who's this?" Sort of, Bud Powell, put him on. Who's this? It's funny. And Oscar Peterson. And I think I absorbed a lot of the more traditional, amazing players in a way by osmosis through what I heard in my home and through Ed. But the hands-on, really digging in, learning the tunes and the standards of our time was the next period of music. And there were those around me that could tell I was heading in another direction, even though I really was not that aware of it. I was just trying to learn. And I was never enrolled in school, by the way. I took a harmony class. I auditioned for the big band and got in. I really couldn't read chord symbols, but it was a blues in F. And Mr. Diamante from Laney Junior College said, "I like you. You're in." And that was where I met Ed.
And you could just feel it. You could feel the music was channeling through you, spiritually.
Yeah, I could get to that F blues without much trouble, and he liked my feel. So that just set me in the setting. I took a harmony class, and I hung with Ed, and I played in the big band for I think 2 semesters. I was never enrolled, never got credits, grades. It was funny. It was like I was just passing through something. So anyway, eventually I moved away. I left the area for a few years. I lived in Seattle. It was a very incubative kind of period with all that rain and beauty and chance to develop things conceptually, although culturally it was kind of shocking because Oakland was so integrated musically, and there was kind of different worlds in Seattle. But I was already into percussion and the drums because I got into that by walking into an Afro-Cuban percussion class at Laney in the summer. So anyway, after moving back to the New York area, I ended up living next door to Baikita Carroll. And that happened in a way that's a whole other story. It had to do with the fact that I had met Michael Gregory, the guitarist that was working with Oliver Lake, when I had been in Boston for a short time. I saw he was in town with Oliver Lake, who I'd heard of, playing the Keystone. And me and Michael got in touch, and he was staying next door. Or he was staying with Baikita. No, he was staying next door to Baikita in a house that was renting rooms, and I had just come back to the area and needed a room. So I moved in there. In the next 3 years, I was neighbors and met all the BAG, Black Artists Group, and AACM people that all came to stay with Baikita. And I learned conceptually a whole other realm of music. I had, before all that, been exposed to Cecil Taylor, Ornette Coleman, and my mind was stretched already. And I was ready for something new that I wasn't even aware of that it was that time in my life. But in it came, you know, I would hear Oliver practicing next door, and that stuff sounded so mysterious. I found out stuff was in 4/4 later.
It's wonderful.
When I got a chance to play with Oliver and them. So yeah, so Baikita pulled me into situations with Oliver, with Julius Hemphill, with Julian Priester, who, you know, I'm excited to be doing something with in a couple months. It's been quite a while. We have something nice coming up at the Healdsburg Jazz Fest. But that's how that period came to be. I started absorbing as well Dewey Redman, Marion Brown, Archie Shepp, a lot of stuff that I hadn't really embarked on. I was now listening to Oliver, Julius, all those beautiful recordings that they did that really were mind expanding and concept expanding. And so that period was the beginning of my very next level of any professional output and activity on my part, where I was invited in with some real masters and tried to bring my best, and that was that period.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, it truly must have been a unique time to arrive in New York.
Shortly after, yeah.
How was the club scene when you first arrived?
Right, it was right after that period that I came. That was 75 to 78 in San Francisco, and that was 78 when I moved here, and it was a great time in the music. The late 70s and the early 80s were really great. The Tin Palace, all the lofts, you know, Rigby, Joe Williams, Ladies Fort. It was a creative time, and the more creative you were, it seems, you know, the more you were appreciated. It's a different time now. It was great. It was, for me, I think I came at a great time for me to a great time here.
Yeah,
to be here.
The loft scene must have been an incredible place. I mean, that's now to us younger people, it's almost legendary that at a time when there was such an ability to be able to play and do so much music. I know some lofts would have jazz playing just 24 hours a day, you know, just straight.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Well, and who in particular, you know, do you think you learned from who frequented those venues? I mean, what guys really instilled the knowledge on you here in New York?
There was so much going on. It was all of great interest to me, from the traditional to the non-traditional, and that's something that is true today about my taste. Although I'm associated a lot with a more avant-garde, I wouldn't really describe myself that way. I just think of music as sound, and therefore you don't always have to name that chord. But Arthur Blythe was hitting real hard during those days. His sound and his deliberateness, and you know, the nature of the rhythm sections behind him. There was so much. It was just like you know, of everything. I could be at the Tin Palace one night and see, just hanging would be Art Blakey, McCoy, George Coleman, Betty Carter. I remember night at Bradley's, I saw all these folks in the same room at the same time.
Wow.
You hung late enough at the Tin Palace, and because I was a musician and I associated with musicians, after everybody left, a lot of times we would be there, and Blakey would be buying everybody a drink who was left, you know. And these were my heroes in the music, and I was a little shy at first, and folks had a way of pulling you in. I remember Blakey coming up to me once and saying, "How come you never talk to me?" He'd seen me so many times. I said, I said, shoot, I guess because you're my hero. He said, that's no excuse. But, you know, it was a great time, and everyone that was playing during that time had an impact on me. Sam Rivers, the impromptu things that would jump off everywhere. I got to play the Tin Palace with my own group before they closed. I don't remember, I know it was Fred Hopkins, God bless him. And I think it was Ronnie Barrage and Kelvin Bell. The young St. Louis guys, when they came here, they kind of gravitated toward me because of my associations with Baikita Oliver Dunes. And Oliver actually gave me my first gig here at Carnegie Recital Hall.
Wonderful.
On the stage with some greats as well. When I met a bunch of players, I met Nana Vasconcelos through Baikita. You know, they were very expansive in terms of who they dealt with. So, but I was taking in everything, the traditional players, and trying to absorb all the worlds at the same time. And I have to say, this makes my path really different from the average jazz musician. It was my passion for Cuban folklore. And from when I first got here, I was associated with the young percussionists that were pursuing the same knowledge as me. And that was another world I was into. My first recording was actually with a Cuban songo group in 82 or 80, anyway, early 80s.
Early 80s, yeah.
And I met Orlando Puntilla Rios in 81 when he came, and that became my, it was just the beginning of so much. These are worlds that both worlds that I was in. And if I had perhaps just zeroed in on becoming a traditional jazz kind of pianist, that would have been one path, but mine is different.
Yeah, yours is a very unique path. You know, you
I have
fused both, and I understand. During that time, you started working with the great free jazz violinist Billy Bang. Could you tell us how it was to work with such a master in that style of jazz?
Yeah, that was the second recording I ever did, was with him. Yeah, that was very eye-opening. There was a space, it was called La Mama's at the time. It was on East 3rd between C and D. And a lot of the St. Louis guys, including Joseph Bowie and a bunch of other folks, were there, and that's where I met a lot of musicians and first played with a lot of people. That was the more avant-garde scene. But that was kind of my, as I say, Oliver gave me my first gig, and so my beginnings here were associated with the more avant-garde players. All of them, by the way, are so rooted in rhythm and traditions that are not avant-garde, from R&B to funk to, I think they all played with R&B and funk groups and absorbed rhythmic traditions of that nature. And so to just call them avant-garde players is really not even fair. They have their roots in tradition as well that add up to who they are. But anyway, Billy Bang was was the first to take a chance and pull me in, take me to Europe. He took me on my first tour, and that was an initiation. I'm going to leave it at that. It was an initiation, and musically it was interesting. Some aspects of what we did I was more into than others. Him as a player and everything he was striving for was beautifully creative and unique, and it was great to be a part of that whole thing. And sometimes he used color-coded charts and things that opened one's mind up to approach the music more conceptually, and things that I could relate to that were in keeping with stuff I was thinking about, helped to expand my understandings of music and my interests.
Well, that's really great. I mean, it's great that someone brought you into that genre, so to speak, of jazz, because you're known as one of those great innovators in that genre, in these days. So in 1983, you received a NEA grant to form a pioneering 14-piece ensemble. Can you tell us a little bit about that group and the name and what it means? And
Yor-Uba continues to be a musical celebration of Cuba in America, and the name implies the progression from ancient Yor-Uba culture from Nigeria by way of Cuba to present-day New York. In 1983, there weren't too many people, exploring or thinking about that period, but definitely not to the level that I was, especially here. And the reason I was is just because I was in both worlds and I was hearing that music as one, as I think I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure. But I was really hearing in my dreams, I was hearing the relationship. I was hearing this tradition set in a contemporary jazz setting. And I was in Orlando Puntilla's real circle of hungry young musicians. For myself, I was still seriously playing percussion and congas. I backed off because that's really hard on my hands for piano. But meanwhile, I continued to study all those traditions, and I began to build a repertoire of music for this group and the concept of the group based on my original material, which was already conducive to any of these kind of folkloric elements, rhythmically speaking, feel-wise, because really my writing and playing was very permeated with it already. So I could take an original piece and I could hear where a particular rhythm that was played on bata or congas would be perfect and it would fit. And so there was a natural connection there. Then I began to arrange and develop the folkloric material in a original manner. So the repertoire was made up of both, and I built repertoire to some extent around Puntilla's kind of favorite folkloric stuff that included not only the Yor-Uba but traditions of Arara, which came from Dahomey but are very prominent in Cuba. So between rumba, which is Wawanko, Colombia and Yambu, and bata, and the Yor-Uba and Arara material, he brought a lot of stuff here that we all learned. Beautiful. Just stuff that I couldn't rest until I did something with it. Certain songs struck me that way. I had to, they haunted me, So anyway, I applied for a grant, for this concept, New Yor-Uba, a musical celebration of Cuba in America, featuring Puntilla. And I got an NEA grant, and we presented at the Public Theater in 1983. We went on to go on tour in '84 in Europe. And you mentioned having seen a video.
Yeah, I saw a great YouTube video.
That was from that period. Now that group was at that time 14-piece. Now it's 10-piece, and I have a small ensemble version. And the small ensemble has done a couple videos recently that the production is beautiful, and the sound, and they're at congahead.com.
Yeah, I've been over there before. That guy is Martin Cohen, right?
Yes.
Great
So
guy, yeah.
so these videos well, anyway, the Puntilla didn't make the trip to Europe, so I had other percussionists that were the masters at that time of these traditions, and now I have Pedrito Martinez, Roman Diaz, and Abraham Rodriguez as my drummers in that group. But anyway, the first group, 14-piece, was made up of everybody that I already had associations with. It was like a big family for me.
Well, that's great,
I had
yeah.
Baikita Carroll, Oliver Lake, Howard Johnson, Bob Stewart, Russell Siddiq, who I worked with in Oakland before I moved to New York, and John Stubblefield. God bless him. Ibaye, for those that know the saying, the meaning. And the rhythm section was at the first concert was Rufus Reed, Fiona Glaf. I have Puntilla, Eddie Rodriguez, Gene Golden, Olufemi Mitchell singing. Excuse me. So and that group went to Europe more or less, a couple changes in the personnel. And then I've since made that into a 10-piece group. That's what I work now. 4 horns instead of 6. Still, you got to have the 3 bata, piano, bass, drums. And we have more recent footage that you can see of what we do. And my goal very much is to keep that group concept moving to the point that we actually record and release the music. And I've been asked for the last 25 years about that one. It's going to happen. It's, it has to happen.
It should be a great record when it comes about.
It has to happen. It's very dear to my heart, and let's just say that maybe all things happen when in their time. I like to look at life that way, and perhaps I'm more prepared to do that at a certain level. You know, as the years have passed, I'm better prepared to do it real righteously.
Well, and you mentioned you applied for a grant. How did you go about securing a grant? I mean, for some of us younger musicians, what was your real process in securing funding for some of your creative projects? Because I know you've received another few grants to do.
Yeah, I think that I could say also, having been a panelist a bunch of times, that I think the reason I got the grants I got, and the reason some people haven't gotten grants they applied for, it's important that that there's some sort of natural next step to what you're doing, you know. And for me, to propose New Yor-Uba was just completely in keeping with my personal evolution. I could write about it without, you know, having to come up with a story, because it was my personal story I was telling by proposing this. You know, I want to do this because this is how I'm hearing it. I'm dreaming this music together. I'm hearing it in my head. I've written it. Here's who I have, you know, to perform it, and I can't wait to do it. In that case, you know. And I think in the other grants that I've gotten too, they were natural extensions of the moment and of where I was, what I had done so far, and what was the next natural step for me. I've seen proposals as a panelist where very flourishy ideas are proposed that involve lots of production value and conceptual aspects that maybe when people are looking at it, they're thinking, when panelists are looking at it, they're thinking, you know, looks like they're trying to impress us, as opposed to do what comes naturally. Now, I'm not the grant queen. I really have only gotten a few, but they've all made a big difference, and I'm out to get some more. They help, that's for sure.
Well, that's great.
A big help.
And you made your first recording debut as a leader called The Source in 1984. And since then, you've recorded 8 albums as a leader. Could you tell us a little bit about that first record and your formula in making compositions and?
Sure. Well, I had like a lot of music stored up, you know, original stuff that I was I didn't have to write. I'd been writing, you know, and recent stuff and older stuff, and I conceived it all for that group. Actually, going to Europe with Billy Bang and recording with him at the Soul Note studios in Milan led to them giving me my date, you know, and then I set up a tour around that. So that first recording, it's kind of hard for me to listen to it. My thought was, you know, purely where am I right now and what do I want to do? And which I think is, you know, legitimate. But it was an early stage. I think that the compositions were you know, worthy. I was going to say great, you know, but I wouldn't say that. But I do think that there's elements in all of them that are of great value, let's say. And that compositionally, I really, and conceptually, I knew what I wanted, but achieving it was yet to come. So, but then I started my quintessence ensemble, and I think that became my context for greatest growth as a pianist, composer, and band leader. And that's the ensemble that I have 5 recordings with. So it has an evolution and a history. And as far as how I came up with the material and things, I was always working on stuff, and then I had this instrumentation in mind, and the players in mind. So the writing was done thinking in terms of what I wanted to achieve conceptually and who was best suited for that. That was always my choice of musicians, was always based on who could kind of execute what I had in my mind, because I could hear the end point to stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you had some really great musicians work with this quintessence group. I mean, such as saxophonist Steve Coleman, Greg Osby, Gary Thomas, David Sanchez, Steve Wilson, Miguel Zenon, and you worked with some bassists Kenny Davis, Anthony Cox, Lonnie Plaxico, and drummers Terry Lynn Carrington and Gene Jackson, just to name a few.
Right.
It must have been really amazing working with all such great musicians and
well, absolutely. And at the time, I was older than everybody. They were young players that really, at those times, they hadn't really put any band together or recordings out. I don't think, that's not a blanket statement, but most of the people you mentioned at that time had never really been band leaders too much. Maybe 1 or 2, mostly no. And, but the way they were playing, they could play changes, they could turn them inside out and upside down, and they could play conceptually. They could create color and mood, and their time was great. I wanted it all. And honestly, there were very few people that I found at that time that I badly wanted to play my music. And if somebody couldn't make it, in fact, I used to get kind of nervous if I got a gig, because I thought, oh man, what if so-and-so can't make it? What am I going to do? And it was really like that then. It's not like that now.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's a difference.
Different situation.
It's different. More people have, everyone has a versatility that that wasn't the goal so much back then. But, the way you meet people too, I met Greg Osby in the situation where, that's a whole story. Let me not get started. Every step leads to another. I had been asked to, I had received a commission to write for the Brooklyn Philharmonic. This is where you asked about grants. Let me mention this one, because it came as such a surprise. I got back from my new Yor-Uba tour in '84, and I had a letter saying that I had been nominated, for this award and commission, and it was Lester Bowie, Marion McPartland, and Dizzy Gillespie that had ultimately chosen me to receive it, and I was given the Brooklyn Philharmonic to write for. So it was kind of scary, and I thought I was going to use a couple of voices, 1 oboe and 1 French horn. But I learned that kind of the more voices I was writing for, the better. I ended up with 40-piece plus a quintet of improvisers. That quintet was going to be Rufus Reid, Fiona Laf, John Stubblefield, and Howard Johnson. Well, John Stubblefield got the gig with, God bless him, with Freddie Hubbard, and couldn't make it, and I was devastated because I wanted soprano saxophone, and I really didn't know anyone else whose sound I liked at that time on soprano. So Rufus had just come back off the road with Jack DeJohnette, who had a new band, and he said, well, there's this young alto soprano player you need to check out. So he recommended Greg to me. So that began our association. So he came in, he did that. Then he did my first quintessence recording. I did his first recording. And we went on to have associations, throughout the years. And and we keep it alive. There's always projects in mind. So so that's how these things come to be. At that time, Greg had not recorded or formed a group yet, but these guys, all the musicians that come in and play my music are giving me a gift. To bring all that passion, knowledge, creativity into my music to help manifest it and help me achieve what my goal, that's a real gift. And so I always need to acknowledge the great value of that, and I hope that other leaders don't take it for granted. For me, it's not, you can't calculate you can't put a number on it in terms of its worth. And it helped me throughout the years by dealing with different players with different fresh concepts, young players that were exploring within the context of my music. I'm hearing things, and it's helping my head to expand, to my ideas to grow, and my concept to reach more of a fruition.
Well, that's really great. I mean, it's and I really enjoy a lot of your compositions from some of these records. And,
thank you.
You're closely associated with M-Bass in the late 80s. Can you tell us what is M-Bass and your associations with two of the guys in that, Steve Coleman and Greg Osby?
Okay, well, I can't really speak to the concept of M-Bass because even though I was associated with it, I was not a member of M-Bass. But my concept was forming in enough of a parallel manner that a lot of these musicians were the very that pool was sort of where they all were, although it wasn't M-Bass at the time. It came later. And so I can't really speak to that, but it was a very creative group of people coming up with their own concepts so they could relate to the creativity in mine. I do, within this interview, want to state that my experiences with legendary jazz players are of great importance and value to me. I'm so much thought of as a leader, and I'm thought of as the one that brought this musician into my band and this one. But I've had the chance to play with people like Freddie Waits and Jimmy Heath and Julian Priester, many others, Tootie Heath. Those experiences are of great value to me, and so as much as I'm associated with my own thing, those moments continue to be a real source of my being grounded in this music to the point that I can do the things that I do and feel that it's legitimate because I'm grounded in tradition. I came up in tradition, and the opportunity to play with great legends in the tradition is something of great importance in my evolution as well.
Well, I mean, it's great that you were able to play with such greats. I mean, it's truly a blessing.
Yeah, I invite much more experience of that nature. Whatever you got, a lot of you need some of the more of the other. I've been more a leader than anything, so those experiences add a balance, give me a balance, and make me a more complete musician. So I look forward to lots more of that.
Okay, so I have a question. At the time when you first arrived in New York, you were one of the very first female jazz musicians in New York. Could you tell us a little bit about how it was to come to a field so dominated by male musicians, or was that a struggle for you, or was it irrelevant really to you?
Well, first of all, I mean, there weren't a lot, but I don't think I was among the first because it's that whole other generation, But I do remember being one of a very few. I remember hearing in the street outside of a venue, I heard Jane Ira Bloom. I had already heard Joanne Burkeen. Other than that, kind of my generation, although Joanne was a little older generation, next gen, the one before me, I don't think there were many models for me personally. The other great women in jazz that were part of the big bands and the swing and era and the more traditional, the older tradition.
Mary Lou Williams.
Well, let's not leave Mary Lou out. I mean, in terms of her influence on me too as a recorded artist, I didn't hear a ton of Mary Lou, but I would hear her, and this was my manner anyway, in that I never immersed myself completely in any one artist's music. I absorbed it. I would hear things, I'd want to see what they did at certain points, so I said, what was that? And I figured it out, as opposed to transposing tons of solos and figuring out how to sound like them. I think that helped me kind of keep a more original sound, which maybe has always been my goal without my knowing it. I'm going off track a little, but only because we can't leave Mary Lou out in terms of her being one that bridged that gap and really took a lot of male piano players to where they went, who became influential on all of us. You know, Mary Lou is vital in our history. But at the time when I came, there were not many women here playing actively on the scene. Mary Lou, of course, was a legend that came in and out, and I got to hear her several times. And I think that I had made a decision not to view myself as a female musician in the midst of a male-dominated music, more like a part of a culture of music that was basically struggling as a whole. Because the nature of the music, I was very kind of philosophically and politically inspired by this music I was into as well. I felt that I was a part of something important politically, socially, philosophically, artistically, and this was my world. So I think that a lot of times things went down and I didn't know why, and my decision not to view through that lens, that limited lens of, oh, it's because I'm a woman, oh, it's because I'm a female, that's why this happened. I probably didn't understand a lot of things that did happen because that's probably what was going on, but I was choosing not to make that my mode of conceiving my experiences and reality. So I think that I chose to make it irrelevant. I think I made it irrelevant to myself, for myself, but it was probably relevant to others, no doubt. And I would find people to associate with that I felt also did not have hang-ups about it. I would find with time, sometimes it would reveal, time would reveal that certain musicians were struggling with my leadership. And it would manifest in various ways. And I would make note of it in that I might choose not to use the person the next time because I felt a conflict. Friction. Yeah, I felt the friction. But more often than not, I continued with the person because there weren't that many choices yet, and that friction created a pearl, often, musically speaking. It wasn't a lot of fun at times because of it, but that was part of the thing. These days, all I want is some peace and joy and love, you know, in the music. I don't have to do that for the rest of my life, but it served a purpose too.
Well, nowadays, as one of the leading female jazz musicians, I'm sure you're an inspiration for a lot of young female jazz musicians now. Do you have any advice for them up and coming?
Shoot, I don't really think they need my advice at this point. I think that the scene is different, the canvas is different, that women that are coming up in the music there's a lot of women around them as well. And so I think that there's a padding there, there's another reality. So I don't know that I need to give advice in that regard. I think that just, as musicians, we just have to work hard at what we do, and that goes for everybody. Funny, I might have had advice 10 years ago. I don't think I have any right now.
Now it's evolved to a place where it's...
I think so, yeah.
Well, when did you start teaching at the collegiate level? Because you're a great educator as well. When did that come about?
Well, I kind of always taught. I first taught at the Haight-Ashbury Music Workshop, and that was in my early 20s. And collegiate level, you know, I don't have a degree, and I was a teacher hired at NYU based on kind of life experience and whatnot. That was, I'm not good with years, but that was in the 90s, maybe early 90s. And I have been substitute teaching at the New School for over 15 years. Certain people that call me regular. Teaching is, wow, it's something that I think just comes kind of natural for me. I never feel a real need to prepare beyond making sure I have material that's appropriate for the level. I can customize any private lesson in piano, ensemble, composition to those that are there in the room. And I think that's what it calls for, as opposed to a formula. And so the teaching thing is great for me in that I feel the reward, you know, more and more actually I'm feeling my intuitions about, I think I can really say that I can quickly see what someone needs next, what's going to make them the most difference, what they'll be most excited about, you know, what's missing, and that one element that's going to make them sound like, take their sound to the next level, and their knowledge. And then if they're afraid of theoretical approach, you know, because, you know, there are a lot of people that stumps them. They play by ear. They really get nervous if they're expected to learn in a particular way. I go around and find another way. At the collegiate level, at the New School, I'm aware of what the goal is in the school, what everybody's striving for. I try to come in with things that, well, I see that I address things other people don't seem to be addressing. I find myself dealing a lot with rhythm section concept, for example. Got a lot of great, really, really creative players that want a very static rhythm section to put all their stuff on top of. Whereas to me, the rhythm section, language, relationship, communing of members of the rhythm section really make a group special or not. So that's something I'll focus on, and God bless Benny Powell, who I was a sub for many years, and that's a great honor. But he told me he really liked me to address the rhythm sections in his classes because he could see the difference when he came back. So, you know, I've had these wonderful honors, you know. These days, or for at least 15 years or more, I've been Reggie Workman's sub. I sub regular for Billy Harper, George Cables, and like I said, Benny Powell. Everybody has a different need in terms of what they're doing in their class and what they want me to accomplish in terms of carrying out their agenda. Others, some want me to bring my agenda in, and especially initially before the class really gets going. So every situation is different. I would love to have a real position, get that, you know, all the benefits and everything, but without a degree these days, that's less common, and there's more competition for everything. So I content myself with doing the various things I do. I was just in Oakland. I did a workshop at the Oakland School for the Arts, a high school level vocal department, because I worked with youth choirs and voice a lot. Yeah, so in Oakland, I did a workshop at the Oakland School for the Arts with the vocal department. I've worked a lot with youth choirs and voice. You know, as a pianist, you have a sense of harmony. And then these Cuban, the tradition of Cuban folklore involves a lot of awareness of harmony at its best. So, and I did workshops. I do workshops regular at the Jazz School in Berkeley. Clinics. I've done clinics at universities all over. Workshops, clinics, residency in composition department at Berkeley School of Music, things like that. So I intend to keep it going and increasing my level of activity in that arena.
As someone who's experience jazz from a teacher mentorship kind of approach. What do you really think about collegiate jazz and how jazz is taught kind of and codified in schools nowadays?
It's a big subject. It's kind of one that a lot of us talk about, that, when the scene was so different. And it's a very mixed feeling. It's changed the face of the music. It used to be that someone that played this music was a kindred spirit because it was more underground. If you were drawn to it, there was something spiritually, politically, culturally that you had in common. And the music, was very spiritual, I think, in the old days. Now it's very technical. It's more formulaic. The colleges give a pretty incredible, well-rounded, education to the students, and fill all these gaps in a sense. And an average student is kind of a virtuoso, these days, compared to someone that age in the old days. There were standouts, but these days you have a lot of people with technical ability and knowledge of many, many tunes and things of that nature. And sometimes you see a very high level of communication and performance within the classroom situation. But there is experience missing. There is assumption that that experience is not relevant to being a good player often. And so it's a different environment. The fact that it's become institutionalized in many ways has changed it a lot. And as Muha was saying the other night, I'm all for the book of changes, because he's saying, change will be, change will come. You better be ready for it. You better accept it, because there's no stopping it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to speak in terms of what was better then. It's different now. I think that the first real signs of it were when a lot of the legends were passing away, and the clubs that always hired them had to really make a move. So what happened was this huge jump from legendary, or much older players to people coming right out of college, giving them record dates, gigs at major venues where they didn't have to pay them much, honestly. That became the new trend, to hire just out of college players and not pay well because they didn't have to. It changed the face of the music a lot in terms of anyone getting paid today. And that probably doesn't sum things up whatsoever, but that's just an observation. I'm sure somehow it's related. The market is flooded with young players with lots of knowledge of the music, and there's kind of I asked students at the New School the other day, what drew you to this? Because the room is full of Koreans, guys from Kentucky, Canada, Israel. How did, well, the internet, makes it a whole other world, but what drew them personally? And you hear lots of different things, as to what drew them. Sometimes it was just the challenge of doing something well. Just as to be the best in basketball or football, you got to be really bad, Same in this music, It's a competitive field, and you have to really work at it. It's training you and training, So that draws some. Others are drawn because of the spiritual nature of the music. Others because the freedom in the music or the history of the music, and it will always be, and it will always draw people. It's deep, it's profound, and to me, the music is a microcosm of how to live life well. You have to be receptive and both, I don't know about aggressive, but you have to input and output simultaneously. You have to listen well. You have to know how to respond and to react in the moment with the right set of tools. You got to have all this stuff at your fingertips. You have to look, listen, hear, receive, uh, project, interact, communicate. You know, that's great stuff for living and getting along in life. And the music is a microcosm of that. So the fact that it's big now in the colleges, I hope that I'll say that this music should not be stripped of its culture or that which it came from. And it was born of Black America, born of the experience in this country. That's why it is what it is. That's why it's philosophically and politically profound throughout history, and it's why it has the dynamics it has, the dimensions it has, the implications it has. So that the music is taught stripped of its culture, I think, is not a good thing. And nobody should have a problem with acknowledging where this comes from. It's very open-armed. You know, John Coltrane with East Indian musicians, Don Cherry with gamelan orchestras, Greg Osby with traditional Japanese players. It goes on, and it goes way back. That it's symbiotic. Is that the word? It flexes. It welcomes things. You know, there's room. You know, so that's all beautiful, and that's why it's expanding, and that's why the intellectual world finds it of interest, and why it's taught in colleges. It's got depth.
Well, expanding from that, where do you really see the future of the music going? Where do you think the future should go, or where do you see jazz flowing towards, if you will?
I wouldn't speculate on it. I think that, you know, the electronics is a part of the music. I love electric keyboard myself. I always have, you know. I love the Fender sounds, you know. In fact, if you put electric keyboard in front of me, I'm not going to use the piano sound. I'm going to use the Fender kind of a sound. Because I really like that. It makes me play different. That's part of our tradition, too. For me, my direction, I sound crazy on me. My direction is, you know, unique to me, and has to do with me allowing the things I love to be very prominent in what I do now, before, now, and in the future. And I think that the union of my influences creates a unique me, and the union of your influences, Jonah, are gonna be the unique you. If I asked you, what do you love, I bet you name a few different realms, you know. Mm-hmm. And it's always true. Every student that I ask has different, you know, artists or even idioms of music that they really like. So now that jazz is so being mixed with everything, you know, I think that some things work, some things don't. I think that having a deep knowledge of all the things you're mixing are very important. And I think that our great tradition can't ever die, because this music is here to be heard forever. And all you got to do is hear two notes of John Coltrane, or Thelonious Monk, or Joe Henderson, someone with a sound, someone with a, you know, identity. These characters, these personalities, these entities make the music what it is today. They'll always be at the base of what this music is going back to. I mean, I'm starting with, you know, players from that generation, but, you know, Bird and Oscar Peterson and Errol Garner and Earl Father Hines on the piano side, you know, all the people I'm leaving out, I can't hardly stand it, but you all know what I mean. There's so many to love.
Yeah, there's so many. Thousands.
So thank God we still got, you know, Wayne Shorter, and we still have Roy Haynes, and we still have those we have. McCoy, people that are with us. Clark Terry. Again, we thankfully there's a list, you know, of folks to name. And still those that are contributing to the expansion of the music, you know. Wayne is always expanding this music, but from a base of tradition. And I think for me, the idea of, you know, feet on the ground, head in the sky is like maybe the essence of this music. Ultimately, it's definitely my orientation with all the rhythmic. For me, rhythm and rhythm concept is an integral part and a starting point for a lot of what I hear, write, play, you know. So these traditions, you know, the jazz tradition is connected to more ancient traditions. There's no end to it. Where it's going, I don't know, but those that really absorb, you know, the history, really absorb it and keep you know, talking about it through their music, as well as being a part of today's you know, environment, are going to continue to create new and interesting music. I really could not take it further in identifying where it's headed, but the music will always be creative if people like this ridiculous debate, is jazz dead? That silly debate, you know, there's no end to this. It's a continuum.
Well, Michele, thank you so much for giving us this such an informative and in-depth interview. Where can people check out your music?
You know, all over the internet. Upcoming stuff includes things in New Jersey, New York, in the Bay Area. I'll be playing there with the Healdsburg Jazz Fest with trio with Billy Hart, Andy McKee, and special guest Julian Priester. That's a nice and different kind of a context for me. Working on a lot of things. I'm working on a solo project with guests. Anyone can find my CDs. They can go to Reverb Nation, to Facebook, to my main website at Jazz Corner. All of my stuff is available, and in the next year or two, I hope to have 1 to 2 new recordings out. You know, that's something that you keep moving on your own. So, hey, just keep your eyes open, and, you know, I'll be around there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
Is that your angle?